What makes departure procedures in aviation so critical for a safe and successful flight, you may ask? Well, departure procedures are like the unsung heroes of aviation, often overlooked but crucial for ensuring every flight's safety and efficiency. These procedures form a series of checks and instructions that pilots and air traffic controllers adhere to, right from the moment the engines start to the point the aircraft lifts off the runway. The steps involved are diverse and complex, including radio checks and taxi instructions, amongst others. The radio check is a vital first step, ensuring clear communication between the aircraft and the control tower, while taxi instructions guide the aircraft safely to the runway. These procedures, although seemingly mundane, contribute significantly to preventing mishaps and ensuring that your flight takes off smoothly and on time. Now let's delve deeper into each of these steps, starting with radio checks. First up in our departure procedures is the radio check. This crucial step ensures that the aircraft station can effectively communicate with nearby aeronautical stations. Its purpose extends beyond a simple call and response. It's about establishing a clear line of communication, essential for safe and smooth operations. When it's necessary for the aircraft station to emit signals for testing or adjusting, it must first obtain consent from any nearby aeronautical stations. This is to prevent any interference with their activities. It's all about being a good neighbor in the skies. Now, when an aircraft station needs to emit test signals, either for adjusting the transmitter before making a call or adjusting the receiver, these signals should not exceed 10 seconds. The signal should consist of numbers spoken out, 1, 2, 3 in radio telephony, followed by the identifier of the station emitting the test signals. A quick tip here: after addressing a call to the aeronautical station, allow at least 10 seconds before making a second call. This helps to eliminate unnecessary emissions while the aeronautical station prepares to respond to the initial call. And if an aeronautical station is simultaneously called by stations from multiple aircraft, the station will decide the order in which the aircraft will communicate. The format for test transmissions includes identifying the called aeronautical station, the aircraft's identifier, the words radio check, and the frequency used. Responses to test transmissions follow a similar format, identifying the calling station, identifying the responding station, and providing information about the audibility of the transmission. Speaking of audibility, it's classified on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being unreadable, 2 being readable now and then, 3 being readable but with difficulty, 4 being simply readable, and 5 being perfectly readable. So, there you have it. Radio checks are the first critical step in departure procedures, ensuring clear communication between aircraft and aeronautical stations. With a successful radio check, we can move on to the next step: taxi instructions. Following a successful radio check, we arrive at the taxi instructions. These are crucial steps that ensure the safe and orderly movement of aircraft on the ground, from the parking area to the takeoff runway. Taxi instructions are communicated by the air traffic controllers in the aerodrome control tower, also known as TWR. These instructions guide the pilots, helping them navigate the complex network of taxiways that crisscross the airport. The control of the aircraft during the departure procedure may be transferred from the TWR to the approach control, also known as APP. This transfer typically happens under two circumstances. Firstly, when there are visual meteorological conditions near the aerodrome, the transfer takes place before the aircraft disappears from the TWR's line of sight, or before the aircraft enters the clouds. Secondly, in instrument meteorological conditions, the transfer occurs on the takeoff runway after the aircraft has aligned for takeoff, or immediately after the aircraft has taken off. Now let's look at the responsibilities of the aerodrome control tower's air traffic controllers during the departure procedure. These controllers have several tasks. They must obtain flight authorization from all relevant controlling and directing bodies, and relay this authorization to the pilot. They must also provide the pilots with meteorological data from their own airport, either directly or through organized broadcasts. This information includes the state of the service runway, data about any non-functioning navigation aids and airport lighting, as well as other information requested by the pilots outside of the Aeronautical Information Bulletin. Additionally, the controllers are responsible for authorizing, if traffic conditions permit, the consecutive requests from pilots for engine startup, taxiing, and takeoff. This ensures that aircraft are appropriately spaced without keeping them on the ground with engines running. With the proper taxi instructions, the aircraft is now ready for the final step before takeoff. So we've successfully navigated through the radio checks and taxi instructions. Now what? Well, let's take a moment to recap. First, we dove into the world of radio checks. This step is crucial to ensure that all communication equipment is functioning properly. We learned that when signals are needed for testing or tuning, consent must be obtained from the relevant station. We also discovered that these signals should not continue for more than 10 seconds, and should consist of numbers pronounced in radio telephony, followed by the station's indicator. We discussed the importance of waiting at least 10 seconds after making a call to the aeronautical station before making a second call. This eliminates unnecessary omissions while the station prepares to respond to the initial call. We also learned about the format of test transmissions and responses, as well as the classification scale for transmission audibility. Next, we moved on to taxi instructions. We found out that the direction and control of the aircraft during the departure procedure are transferred from the aerodrome control tower to the approach control organ under certain conditions. We delved into the responsibilities of air traffic controllers at the aerodrome control tower during aircraft takeoff, such as obtaining flight authorization, transmitting meteorological data, providing runway status information, and granting pilots' requests for engine startup, taxiing, and takeoff. At each stage of the departure procedures, safety is the primary focus. These checks and instructions are in place to ensure that every flight, regardless of size or destination, is conducted in the safest manner possible. The procedures we've covered today are the building blocks of a successful flight. They're the first steps pilots take to ensure the aircraft is ready for the journey ahead. They're the checks and balances that keep everyone on board safe. And with that, we've covered the essential departure procedures, ensuring a safe and successful flight from the ground up.